I'm here on Friendly Fire with Cal Thomas, America's top syndicated columnist, author of many books, including Common Ground. Cal's covered many subjects over the years, 3 decades of covering politicians, crucial issues, presidents, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush. Now we have President Obama, who came in on hope, change we can believe in. Change we can believe in, by the way, a phrase I never quite understood, because you can believe in all change. But now we have President Obama in office, and there was a lot of hope that he was going to be a great civil libertarian. He was going to do all these great things, but all of a sudden it's bogged down. The ACLU has come out and criticized Obama on the civil liberties record. What happens when people get to Washington? Cal, you covered the Washington scene.
Well, first, John, Washington is neither the center of the problem nor the center of the solution. I think when we project too much hope on a politician, we're always going to be disappointed, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. The founders understood that the government that functions best governs least, and we've gotten away from that. We now think that the government is able to do everything, but as we've seen from the BP oil spill, that should have really awakened us to the fact that government is and ought to be limited, and that liberty and personal freedom are what should be celebrated.
How can you limit government today? It's everywhere. It's like, you know, a large octopus, it's just encircling us. I mean, with Obama now, they say he's more into regulations than any president we've had in recent years. It just keeps growing.
I think we projected too much on government, and government is unable to fulfill our expectations. Look at the BP oil spill, for example. People thought that, well, the government ought to be able to come right in there and plug it, but it can't. The founders understood that limited government works best for individuals. And we've become a nation now of a collective, not of individuals. That's why when Obama said during the campaign that I want to spread the wealth around, this isn't in the tradition of what the founders believed. We want to create conditions under which people can build more wealth for themselves, not to turn it over to government so government can redistribute it. That's what we defeated with the Soviet Union. That's not what we want to adopt for ourselves.
You know, what I see too is, speaking of big government and what we're seeing out in the country today, is a lot of apathy growing.
Oh, I mean, no question.
I thought for a while the Tea Party movement, there was going to be this great surge, but that's dying. I can tell it by just how people respond to what we do here. So what is there to energize people today? Again, you look a lot of young people who watch these interviews. What in the world can they do to change things?
Well, John, I think we need to focus on what works. We didn't just crawl out of the cave yesterday. We know what works. We know what works in our lives. We know what works in our culture. We know what works in our country. And I think if we get away from this ideological battle, which frankly the fundraisers and a lot of cable TV and talk radio want to exacerbate because it promotes and perpetuates their own power, and we start focusing on what actually works. How do you get a better education? How can our schools function better to produce the kinds of young people who can compete in an increasingly global environment? How can we reduce poverty? What decisions can be made when you're young that will offer the best opportunity for you to lead an economically independent life, independent of government? We know what works. We're afraid to teach those things anymore because it might offend people who believe in different things. We know that getting married before you have children works best for the married couple and for the children. But now we say that all families are equal, and President Obama puts out a Father's Day greeting that includes 2 fathers. Come on, all relationships aren't equal. We know what promotes the general welfare. Let's start promoting it again and focus on what actually works in our culture instead of just allowing everybody to do their own thing.
What used to work, though, was there was a sense of community.
Yes.
Churches were involved in community. There was less of a spiritual void. We have a spiritual void in this country right now. There was a certain sense that there were values that worked for everybody. There's no common glue anymore, what I call the common value system. It used to be what we would call the Judeo-Christian value system. What's happened?
Well, if you take a look at the what people, young people especially, if they're not believers or just have a distant relationship with church or God, they look at the religious establishment, for example, whatever that is. Let's just say the evangelical subculture. They don't see people out doing what Jesus commanded them to do, loving your enemy, praying for those who persecute you, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting those in prison, and caring for widows and orphans. Not as an end, but as a means of demonstrating the love of God so people will hear about Jesus Christ and his power to redeem their lives. They see an affiliation with political parties on both left and right. The right did it with a moral majority in the Christian coalition, and the left is doing it with sojourners and some of these other people. The too close association with earthly power always diminishes the kingdom of God power, without question, whatever the perspective. And so they see that, and they see the church or God as just being another interest group like labor unions and gay rights groups and other groups competing for temporal power, and they don't like it, and they're right not to like it. The church needs to get back, meaning individuals, to doing what its founder commanded them to do. When we're obedient to him and do his work, then we have what I call bubble up morality. We won't need to worry about so many laws because the country will be living according to righteous principles again.
Well, the last question here and comment from you. The country was founded on some key principles, but the founding document of the country is the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson states really clearly there that there's two basic principles that operate well in America politically. One is there's a creator who gives us certain absolute rights, among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of the happiness. And the other is the American people have to participate. Well, we've taken the first part of that principle, probably the most important part, which is the idea that there's a higher law that even the government's subjected to, and now it's just the people, but the people don't participate anymore, and so the government has essentially become our God in most respects.
Yes.
You've alluded to that. We expect the politicians can cure everything,
That's
including
right.
an oil spill,
Yeah.
which is absurd.
Of course it is. But look, there's something else in that Declaration of Independence where Jefferson laid out the philosophical foundation for the Constitution, the purpose of government. He said, and to secure these rights, that is the rights that God has endowed, governments are instituted among men. The purpose of government is to secure rights. Now, when Tom Harkin, the senator from Iowa, in the Obama healthcare debate, comes out and says at a news conference, we are about to give you a new right, the American people. That is a direct contradiction to what the founders intended. The government doesn't give rights. The government secures rights that have been endowed. And that's why government has become dysfunctional.
Government's incapable of giving rights.
Government is incapable of giving rights. And what the founders understood, and Jefferson brilliantly understood in the Declaration, any right granted by government can be taken away by government. And that's what you're going to see in the big healthcare debate, and it's outworking. Does the government have the right to deny surgery or care for somebody because the government decides their life has no more value? That's what's coming.
Thank you, Cal Thomas.
Thank you, John Whitehead.
Good job, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, do we know how to do it or what?